Well, the protection of the environment and human rights today really has to go together. It's impossible to protect the environment if we don't have a clear human rights protection, for example, to have access to scientific information, to have the freedom of information, or to have even access to environmental information in general. The same way that if ever the environment is not protected, then it's very difficult to have a real access to water, to food, or even simply to life. And unfortunately today, in the existing trends, more and more people who are working for the environment find themselves in a situation where their fundamental rights are being violated and are being threatened. So we see that over the time, more and more, the link between human rights and the environment is absolutely crucial. Now, it is true that historically speaking, these two legal regimes have developed themselves separately. And they have specific internal logics which are not exactly the same. So it's very important to understand the logic of each of these systems when we have to work in this field, but also to be aware of the connections which exist today, because over the time, more and more legal instruments or even jurisprudence are bringing the two things together. The different regional courts on human rights have taken a number and are taking more and more environmental issues on board. You have new instruments like, for example, the Aarhus Convention on access to information, public participation and access to justice in environmental matters, or the Escazú agreements, the very recent Latin American agreement, which basically cover the same pillars. Or you can see that in the recently adopted in 2015 in Paris, the Paris Agreement on climate change, in its preamble, has also very strong human rights elements. So we see that over the time, connections between these two legal fields have increased and are continuing to increase. So it's very important when we're working on these issues to see these different trends. And here in Geneva, we're fortunate to have some of the main organizations and institutions which are carrying this forward. First, you have some new instruments. I've mentioned the Aarhus Convention, but you see also that in human rights treaties, treaty bodies, for example, are developing more and more elements which relate directly from the convention to environmental issues. So this is, for example, very useful when you work at the national level for litigation, and we see that tribunals, courts, more and more refer to these types of developments. Then we have also here in Geneva a number of mechanisms which are absolutely unique because individuals have the capacity to bring to the international level problems which are happening in their own countries. And this is one of the very strong specificities of the international human rights regime. These elements are being used more and more also in the field of environment. And then also in Geneva, probably one of the last points, is that in order to protect people who are working for the environment or protecting the environment, we have procedures, a number of them, like the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, which now has taken very strong positions on this. The Human Rights Council has adopted recently a resolution to protect people working in the field of the environment. And we see other type of mechanisms being under development. So here in Geneva, we are in a privileged situation to bring to the people who are attending the course some of the main and recent developments, some of the trends which are going on, and we are in a very good situation to observe these types of development and to share it in the training course with some of the people directly involved in this and with some of the leading academic figures who teach in Geneva or in the surrounding of Geneva. So that's why we look forward to having people who are involved in this issue, academic researchers who want to know better how these things are developing here, or activists, people working in the field and who are using these instruments and to need to have an upgraded information about what is being developed today that we can use in order to protect human rights and the environment.